once you learn to love the irritating things that arise, it completely pivots your whole freaking life.
If you didn't poop, you'd actually die because the toxins would build up.
We are not our thoughts. We're not our feelings. We are the consciousness that resides behind that.
I was in victim, and my coach said to me, why are you choosing to be so stressed?
I'm sorry I've beaten up my kids again and given them 5 black eyes. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself.
Peace is knowing your stuff, having done the inner work so that you're not pulled around by life. You're able to be the calm point in the center of the storm, as it were.
To love every single part of your being. Your thoughts, your fuck-ups, your anger, your love, your joy, your heart, your shit, your sexuality, your desires, your kinks. Everything, all parts of it can be loved.
I'm Paul von Bergen, the host of Radical Expansion. This podcast is about giving you the tools and the wisdom to radically expand your life with such heart-centered spiritual meaning that when it comes to your final breath, you'll have a little cheeky smile on your face and complete peace of mind. I have helped over 35,000 people expand their lives at my Sydney Healing Centre, Billabong Retreat, and am now bringing this invaluable experience to you through my understanding of ancient wisdom combined with modern science. I will share the simple and highly effective practices to manifest big creative expansion, great abundance, and fun and pleasure beyond even your wildest dreams. Enjoy.
Good morning, Louise, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting because it might not be the first podcast we necessarily publish, but this is the first one I have done in this new series of interviews. And we're sitting here in this like big posh studio for the first time. And it feels really pro and professional. And there's like lights and there's cameras and there's mixing desks, and it just feels,
light camera action, indeed.
It feels really serious, doesn't it? And professional.
We are very professional, but we're not very serious.
Very serious. Yes, I'm not sure I can make that promise. I'm going to be serious. I'm going to try. I'll try and be relatively restrained. But yeah, so super excited. Thank you for agreeing to do this at the relative last minute. At, where were we? Were we at dance or we were at something?
We were at Billabong when you asked me.
We were at Billabong, weren't we? That's right. You came up to Billabong Retreat last week and we've hung out this weekend, haven't we? And
we had some fun with some cacao and some ecstatic dance.
Had some fun with cacao and ecstatic dance and moved our bodies and celebrated life and got into ecstatic states of joy and connection and looseness and liberation.
Bliss and silliness. And so important.
It's so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that's why I've got this little orange doll here, because that reminds me of my playful child. And it's there to kind of keep reminding me to keep dropping into that playful child. Never forget that playful child. A lot of people do, unfortunately.
That's one of the things I love about you, actually, that you have that playfulness that comes through. Yeah.
That's much nicer than just saying that I'm really immature.
That'll come later.
That's right. Is it a fine line between remembering your playful child and being an immature brat?
It's all about the meaning, isn't it? All that meaning that we bring.
It's all about the meaning. I read a quote the other day that said something like, one of the biggest lies we've been told is that we should grow up. And that, we're all trying to grow up and be serious and be mature.
Yeah.
But, maybe growing up, ironically, is remembering our playfulness.
Yes, well, if we take growing up too seriously, that's where we mess things up. Because obviously we want to mature and evolve and grow as humans. But if we take it, we say in NLP, if we get serious, we get stupid.
Okay.
Because when we're serious, we're not actually able to take in new information or be fluid and in flow as much because we become more rigid.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So we're going to make this podcast playful.
Great.
We're not going to forget our inner child. So if I suddenly burst into dance, I was listening to Jamiroquai on the way down. I love that song, Cosmic Girl. I almost thought, oh my God, I wonder if we should start the podcast with dancing to Cosmic Girl. But I thought it might be hard with the camera angles.
Well, let's definitely finish it that way.
Finish it. Okay.
Bit of a dance.
So Louise Walker, we've been talking briefly last night, You practice as a developmental coach. Notice I didn't say you are a developmental coach. Yeah, I think that's really quite important, not to label ourselves as these identities, which I'm sure we'll probably come on to in a little bit. So yeah, you practice or your service to the world as a developmental coach. And we're going to spend some time today talking about what is a developmental coach, how you got into practicing as a developmental coach, and also about some of the programs that you offer, including your gentle power.
Peaceful power.
Peaceful power.
But gentle power could work too.
Peaceful power program.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And we're also in discussions, aren't we, about the new platform that I'm just about to launch and whether we can integrate into that. And hopefully by the time this gets published, we'll have made a decision about that.
Awesome. Love a decision.
Yeah. And we'll be able to add on to the end of the podcast where people can find you, how they can do your Peaceful Power program, and they'll get a good understanding from this interview about what it's all about and how it can benefit them and how it can help them in their lives. Because everything we do is about trying to help people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Being of service is one of the reasons we're here, right?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's start with how did you, or what was your sort of journey into offering developmental coaching as a service? Where did that begin?
It began with me working in corporate events and marketing and experiencing a lot of stress and burnout and realizing I needed to make some serious changes because I was on a downward spiral and wasn't healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, like at all. And I had to really seek out some alternatives. And I started to meditate, I started to do yoga, and then I got my first coach. And it was profound having a coaching conversation. I had nothing like it before. And I trained in NLP. I trained as a meta coach, an Enneagram coach, integral coach, and a developmental coach. That's sort of the long list.
Okay.
And really it's been a lot of work on self and a lot of work in training to become and to be able to practice a developmental coach.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pushed by pain and then pulled by the vision of doing it was really the journey.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I've got like about 10 things in my mind now that I'm like, okay, I've got to unpack that. Got to unpack that. Okay.
I need a clipboard for you.
Yeah. So just going back to one point. So you experienced the benefits of working with a developmental coach, and you know, how is that so appropriate that when we teach and when we offer services, you know, the most authentic way to offer something is based on our own experience of the benefits that we've got from something, so we know for sure that has worked. So that sounds like that was your journey. You worked with this coach and they asked you what you said were these deliciously uncomfortable, is that the word you used? Deliciously uncomfortable questions.
Yeah.
Can we unpack that a bit?
Sure.
How can surely how can an uncomfortable question be anything else apart from painful and stressful and depressing and stuff? How can an uncomfortable question be delicious?
Well, ultimately, the question, I was perceiving it as uncomfortable. It wasn't, it was just a question, but my framing was how I took it in then, my level of ego strength. This is uncomfortable. Because with coaching, especially developmental coaching, there's a level of challenge. So we're challenging the structure, the meaning making of the client. So to give you an example to ground this, a couple of points from that coaching, that first coach. One, I was running a big story about how stressed I was at work.
Yeah.
How big my to-do list was, etc. You know, I was in victim, and my coach said to me, "Why are you choosing to be so stressed?" And I said, "I'm not choosing to be stressed." I thought in my head, what an idiot.
Yeah.
And he asked me again, and I said, "Have you seen my to-do list?" Like, I had really stuck to the story. And he asked me about 3 or 4 times, and it was the 4th time that I realised what he was actually pointing to with his question, which was I was choosing to be stressed.
Yeah.
And that was a really big moment for me, my level of consciousness then to get. Stress wasn't out there, it was something I was creating inside me, my map of reality, my meaning, my belief system, etc. So that was a big part. Then going, right, well, what else am I choosing? How powerful am I? And it was a real wake-up moment, and it was deliciously uncomfortable. Delicious, so I was like, wow, let this growth in, uncomfortable, so I was like, shit, this is actually me. And then the other part is my blood parents both died when I was very young. And we did some NLP work and timeline therapy, going back to some memories, and also clearing some of the beliefs I had that it was unfair, poor me, it shouldn't have happened, and coming into deep, radical acceptance of my parents having passed so young.
Yeah.
And that, that has been a journey to get to full acceptance of it. But coaching has been what has allowed me to reframe that for myself, and not just mentally, but fully embodied. Like, there's no part of me that is not in acceptance of it anymore. I still feel grief sometimes, but I'm in acceptance of how life unraveled.
Yeah.
And coaching's, given that to me.
Wow. God, another 10 points I want to unravel. We've got to keep these sound bites quick, otherwise I'm going to forget all the points. So that learning, when you said, your coach said to you, why are you choosing to be so stressed? And you were like, no, I'm not going to ask you the question again. Why are you choosing to be so stressed? That is so fundamental to how I teach mindfulness, actually. In terms of, that other people do not have the power to plug in through some kind of tubing to our kind of biological chemical system and pump cortisol through our body. No one has the power to make you stressed. No one has the power to make you angry. No one has the power to make you sad. But we do. We get into that narrative, don't we? Of, oh, yeah, you made me so angry. Oh, God, I'm so angry because of that. And it's always externalizing our internal response, like someone else or something else is responsible for it. And that is such a fundamental shift, isn't it, in how we see ourselves, in terms of how empowered we are, that actually, no one can do that. Nothing can do that. I am my central nervous system. I am my consciousness. I am the regulator. And I have the power with practice to self-regulate.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. And recognizing that when we're triggered, often people will think the trigger is out there or it's someone else triggering them, but we trigger ourselves in the face of other people.
Yeah.
And triggering is so subjective. What might trigger me might not trigger you, which when we know it's my trigger.
Yeah.
And, triggers is a big part of the peaceful power work you mentioned.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Great.
I know we'll probably get to that later, but just what you said is just, so bang on.
Yeah, we definitely need to talk about triggers. Triggers is a huge thing. I think, that empowerment over our emotions, our thoughts, really understanding who we are is really critical. Interesting, actually, like you said, you're in experiential event marketing and events. That's exactly what I was in as well for 12 years in London. So we were probably doing the same thing.
Wow.
Yeah, I was putting on like wacky stunts and
same.
Parties for cigarette companies and alcohol companies and soft drinks companies. And
I worked for some alcohol companies.
Yeah.
As well, and did some big events.
All the devil brands. Is this what we're trying to do? We're undoing our karma, aren't we?
Exactly. It wasn't a fulfilling job. Certainly fun at that stage of my life, but I wasn't being of service. It didn't feel.
Yeah, that's right. It was just about making money, really, wasn't it? And I don't know about you, but then I was in reflection of that. I wasn't living healthily. I was consuming too many cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, all of that kind of bad food and stuff. So it's almost like a reflection of what we're doing, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. Okay, so the new program is called Peaceful Power. Okay, Peaceful Power. Wow, I love those two words juxtaposed together. It's like, it's almost like it's just like to sit there and just absorb that a minute. Peaceful power, because they're not two words that we normally hear put together. If anything, the word peaceful is all nice and lovely and everyone likes that. But power often is seen as bad or corrupting or like a dictatorship or authoritarian, and it sometimes has some negative connotations. So can you just briefly tell me, why you chose Peaceful and Power as the naming for this program that you're offering?
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, a couple of things. One is my understanding, this is where I feel like that myself, is that when we are so deeply in our peace, from that, the power is there as a result and emanates from us with no effort, because we're at peace with ourselves and at peace with life, and that is actually the ultimate power.
Yeah.
And so peace for me is very much about knowing your stuff, having done the inner work, so that you're not pulled around by life. You're able to be the calm point in the center of the storm, as it were.
Yeah.
So it's the knowing thyself, it's having done the work, and it's being able to come into that center point. And then I like to think of power as being able to own the powers that you have. So the power that we have, there's 4 powers that we own. One is our thinking and our feeling, and one is our saying and our doing. So we have 4 of these powers. 2 are internal, the thinking and feeling, and 2 are external, the saying and the doing.
Okay, yeah.
And so this is called like our power zone. So when we own our power zone and our powers, we can be really powerful in the world. And it's about recognizing that that's actually all we really have, power and control over most of the time, right? But so much energy is spent trying to control others or change other people or thinking or feeling.
Yeah.
And actually, when we come back to self and recognize this is our power zone, these are our 4 personal powers, that is so very powerful. Yeah. So it's not about actually trying to have power over others like you were saying, the negative connotations. It's really owning how freaking powerful we are.
Yeah.
When we acknowledge and own everything that we think and feel and everything that we say and do, and how impactful that is.
It's so true. I do a section in my show about being the change, the famous Gandhi quote, be the change you want to see.
Yeah.
And when you look at, okay, what do I want to change in the world? What do I want to change? Well, of course, the only place to start is in yourself.
Yeah.
How you're thinking, feeling, saying and doing.
Yeah.
Are they the 4 things? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's challenging enough as it is, let alone, and you're the one connected through your 10 billion neurons and your sympathetic and parasympathetic response system. You're integrated into that system, and that can be challenging. So I don't know how people think they're going to try and change someone else, when they can't even plug into them, So as you say, that is absolutely the place to start, because that is 100% completely and totally within our control.
Yeah.
And I like the word that the coming to peace with the chaos around you, or whatever's happening around you. I think is the really critical skill. It's not trying to numb the chaos, control the chaos, because that's almost not possible. And I think when people actually have this objective for life of happiness, I think sometimes that's a mistake. And I use the word contentment a bit more, which is actually very close to, very similar in meaning to what you mean by the peace, coming to be contented with what's happening around you, or being at peace with what's happening around you. In fact, my only mission for life is to die with peace of mind. So peace.
How powerful is that?
How powerful is that?
Yeah, so you can see as we play with the word, actually how very beautifully and inextricably they're actually linked.
Yes.
Yeah.
So peace, coming to terms or being at ease with whatever's unfolding, or whatever reality in your life is unfolding, just being at ease with that, not being in resistance. Not
being attached, not being in resistance, coming back to that neutrality, that witnesser, that observer, that quiet place. And to get to peaceful power, there's some work that needs to be done.
Yeah. I love what Eckhart Tolle says. Eckhart Tolle says that stress is caused by the difference between how your life is unfolding and how you think your life should be unfolding right now. So it's linked to that piece. It's about completely being not at peace with what's happening with you now. And when you're not at peace with what's happening, that's a tension, because there's a differential between what's happening and what your mind thinks should be happening. And that differential is what causes the tension and the stress.
Yeah.
And then so power then, so we've talked about peace. So power is, you said, over really understanding that you have full control over your thoughts, your feelings, your saying and your doing, those 4 things.
Yeah. Okay. And I prefer to use the word power than control, even though there's some truth in that.
Yeah.
So, becoming a powerful being isn't about trying and striving and pushing. So it's not about being over in your masculine. It's actually having a regulated yin and yang energy.
Yeah.
And one thing I've learned from my journey towards peaceful power is I've had to get really, really, really clear on what pulls me out of that state.
Yeah.
Because that's where we work. I know how it feels and I'm in the peaceful power, but of course I'm not there all the time because I'm human, right?
Yes.
There's triggers and there's reactions and there's attachments and aversions. So it's recognizing that peaceful power is a state that we can come back to. And it's a state that we can cultivate within that then inspires others as well. So it's humble, it's unspoken. No one needs to say that they're in peaceful power, but we can feel it. If someone's in their peace and aligned with their power, we can feel it in their energy field, how they stand, how they speak, the words they use, how they show up.
Yeah.
So
their presence,
exactly.
And I like how you used the word, it's not about striving. I have got a bit of an issue with a couple of words, and striving's one of them. So my kids went to a school once, and their motto, the school motto, was strive for success. And to me,
in programming,
this is strive looks like it's like striving to do a big poo or something. It's stressful, it's straining, isn't it? It's like striving. It's not ease or grace or peaceful, is it?
And what is success? Like, what's the story we want to tell ourselves about success?
Yeah.
What do we get told at school? It's about coming top of the class.
Yeah.
And if not, you're less than. And then that's where the conditioning, the programming starts. And
almost like suffering. It's like you've got to do the hard work. You've got to strive. There's no gain without pain.
Yeah.
And all of that stuff, which actually might be true actually, but we'll come on to that in a bit. But we might rephrase it.
Yeah.
But that notion that it has to be stressful. That it doesn't have to be easy. I mean, I love the concept of woo-wee in Eastern philosophy, which is effortless action. So that's what it is. It is action-based, isn't it? There is a doing about it, but when it's done from that peaceful place, when the power manifests from that peaceful place, it comes with a real ease and flow.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the bit that's coming through I want to share is that when we're in our peaceful power, we're able to drop behind.
Yeah.
So most of us, or many of us, live in the story of life, pulled around by the content. Yeah. And I mentioned the triggers, the aversions, etc. Whereas in peaceful power, we're able to drop back behind that. And rather than, this is one of Eckhart Tolle's quotes, rather than being the thoughts and feelings, we're the awareness behind them.
Yeah.
So the awareness of how we're thinking, how we're feeling, what's showing up, but also having done the work so we really know our stuff.
Yeah.
We have to know our stuff. So we have to do the work, whether it's with a coach or whatever your means is, so that if triggers come up, what is that trigger about? Because it's never actually about that particular situation. It's something within you that is being triggered.
Yeah.
Unless we know what our stuff is, know what the limiting beliefs are, the childhood experiences we haven't yet fully resolved within ourselves, we aren't able to be in our peaceful power because we're still living from a past identity, from a childhood structure that is still running us as an adult. And we sometimes say it's like the kid's got the keys to the Ferrari.
Yeah, okay.
Or the 4-year-old's driving the bus.
Yeah.
So to really allow us to express and activate our peaceful power, there's some shedding and some unraveling to be done.
Yeah, okay. So, guys, a million things I want to unpack there. So I'm going to go back to the first one I remembered. So we talked about realizing or standing behind the unfolding of our life and realizing we are not those things. So I teach about that as what I call it metacognition. So the realization that we are not our thoughts, we're not our feelings, we're not our life situation, but we are the consciousness that resides behind that. And it's a very subtle shift in our mind when we realize that, and it's going from the subjective to the objective. So rather than everything being existential, it's like, oh, that's just a thought pattern. And it's a subtle shift, but it's really profound in its impact, because then you don't suffer because of those things, because you don't identify with those things. You don't identify, oh, they're just some thoughts. I don't have to take those seriously. I don't have to follow those thoughts. I don't have to believe those thoughts just because they came into my mind. I don't have to feel guilty because of those thoughts. I don't have to be ashamed because of those thoughts. They're just a thought, and the same with emotions.
Yeah.
And we can realize that we are the presence behind those. We can observe them as they arise, hopefully, if we do our practice, and therefore we can maybe catch the triggers a bit earlier, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, in building on that, the crux of the developmental coaching that I offer is I'm able to hear and point to the blind spots that's running for the client.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you're speaking about, right? The triggers, etc., believing that you are the thoughts, the thought being the belief systems.
Yeah.
And so without someone to listen and point to that is when we we can't see what we can't see.
Yeah.
So having someone to mirror back and listen, like I'm trained to listen to what's running unconsciously for people, unconscious patterns of thinking and behaviour, and to feed it back so that the person gets awareness of it. And then they start to realise the habituated patterns that are running that they're not aware of, that I can hear in their speech.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of both. It's being able to sit and witness, but to be able to witness, we first need to understand what don't we have the awareness of.
Yeah.
It's like that's the step first. Then once the awareness is there, it's been fed back and there's some understanding of how we're creating our reality and what we're running, we then, with that awareness, get to sit behind and go, oh, there's that pattern of me people pleasing. There's the pattern of me running control or judgment. And that's when we come into our power, because then we can be objective, like you said, rather than subject to what has run most of our lives that we haven't even been consciously aware of.
Yeah, I find, a big percentage of people who have been coming to my mindfulness retreats are not aware that there's any difference between consciousness and thinking.
Right.
And actually their whole identity is based around their thoughts and their memories. That's who they believe they are, basically. And it's a very, very limiting belief system, because when you think about thoughts are really just language, and very often they're just words. And these are made up things. These are made up forms or sounds that we've given meaning to. And they're a relatively new thing. Like, we haven't had the language complexity that we have now. We didn't have it certainly 10,000 years ago, let alone 50,000 years ago or 500,000 years ago, when we were still kind of basically grunting, and probably only have...
Grunting still happens.
Grunting's good. Wish we can duck to the rest of the interview in grunts and see how far we get. So I think, for me anyway, a big pivotal moment for people is the realization that there's a difference between conscious awareness and the thinking mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they are not the thinking mind, they are the conscious awareness. And once they can start seeing that, then maybe, as you said, they can start believing you when you say, oh, these are just patterns coming up from your subconscious mind based on your childhood upbringing, and let's get into your parents' upbringing and your grandparents' upbringing. And, people talk about going back at least 8 generations. And I mean, I actually prefer to go back even further. I think we've all got about 400-500 million years of PTSD from our years on the savannah when everything wanted to eat us and rip us apart. And we got these highly sensitized amygdala, which developed to be highly sensitive because there were so many threats around, and we're still living with that highly sensitized amygdala.
And the threats now, the boss saying, have you done that deadline?
That's right.
So it's so different.
They're so different, but the thing is, our body reacts exactly the same to a perceived threat of the email from the boss talking about the deadline, oh my God, is my job at risk, as the saber-tooth walking through that door and about to rip our head off. The stress response system and the amygdala knows no difference. It pumps the same chemicals around the body. It shuts down the immune system, the digestion system. It brings the blood away from the prefrontal cerebral cortex, which is ironically the part where we can actually be present and notice these things. You can't make new neurons. It's such an unhealthy state to be in. It's fine if you're in there for 15 minutes, but people are living in these states.
Yeah, absolutely.
Their whole freaking lives.
Yeah. And when there's not recovery from the stress response is when it can become chronic stress, and that's when it can become dangerous and lead to health concerns.
Yeah, look, I actually think, stress is one of the biggest causes of disease on this planet.
Agree. Yeah. There's a stat which is 80% of trips to the doctor are due to stress.
Yeah.
I just would like to loop back for a moment just to talk an analogy that might be really useful for the listeners around what we're talking about with like the witness, the consciousness and the thoughts. So an analogy I like to use to explain is imagine there's a running river.
Yeah.
On the other side of the river there's a grassy bank. Excuse me. So when we're in the thoughts, we're in the water.
Yeah.
So we're getting pulled along by the thoughts, the pulses of energy running through the mind. And it's like the monkey mind. And we're getting pulled under the water, we get stuck behind boulders, we're in it. And so becoming more consciously aware and becoming the witness that is about stepping out of the water onto the grassy bank and then looking back and going, there's my thoughts, there's the running water. And that's a very simple analogy that one of my dear friends, Jane, shared with me years ago, but it's always just a real simple way for people to actually understand what we're pointing to.
Yeah, no, I like it. I've got my own analogy, actually,
Oh, that's so cool.
which is also linked to water.
Is it?
So mine's the ocean analogy. So it's imagine you're on an ocean in a little tinny. So hopefully the Aussies can resonate with that.
Yeah.
So you're in a little tinny, and some days the ocean's really calm and the sun's shining, and you're just floating around in the tinny, and it's really easy and light. And sometimes maybe the wind picks up a bit, and you're getting bobbed around a little bit. And some days, the storm's really brewing, and you're rocking, and you're thinking, oh wow, this is really edgy. And then of course some days there's a massive cyclone and you're getting thrown around and you're not even sure if you're going to survive or not.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of people live on the surface. But the trick is to dive deeper into the mind, deeper into theirs, and dive down. Anyone who's scuba dived will know what this feels like, and it can be quite rough on the top, but you can dive down even 5 meters, 6 meters, 10 meters, and lie down on the bottom, and you can look up and you can see the waves, you can see the turbulence, you can see the different fluctuations of the mind of the waves, and you can kind of feel the ebb and flow of them a little bit, but you can observe them without being destroyed by them, without being knocked about by them. In fact, as John Kabat-Zinn says, he says, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So there's lots of analogies with the water, and I mean, heck, we're made of water, aren't we? So of course, why wouldn't it be?
And water representing consciousness as well, like all of our sort of consciousness, little drops that forms the one consciousness of the ocean. So we could do a podcast on analogies.
We could just do a whole podcast. So many analyses, I've got so many little stories and details. Okay, so what have we? So we've talked about what we mean by peaceful and what we mean by power. Now, I believe there's 5 components to the peaceful power program. Can you just quickly say what those 5 are? Yeah. And then if we haven't covered them, or which ones we haven't covered, we'll start going through them.
There's actually so many components.
Okay.
To be fair, some of the areas I thought we could talk about today would be triggers.
Yeah.
Would be how to care less what people think about you.
Yeah.
How to become more objective, which you kind of looked at already.
Yeah.
Getting really clear on blind spots. And then like ownership and accountability as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure other areas will come up. They're just some ones as starters for us to explore.
Okay, I'll try and remember those. But so triggers. So we've talked about, people get triggered. Their patterns coming up from their subconscious mind based on their upbringing or their ancestral trauma or whatever. And then is there what's the first thing you would say to someone in terms of what is the practice to help you deal with triggers?
Yeah, the first thing, one that's really important is actually to allow yourself to own it.
Yeah.
So what can be really good if you're in a conversation with someone is actually to say, I'm quite triggered right now. Because the minute we actually voice it, we then become objective to it rather than being in it and trying to pretend that we're not. And that can be super powerful because 1, we're owning the trigger, and 2, we're speaking to it and making it objective rather than being in it and being subject to it. So that's one thing. Getting really curious about it. So that's the practice of self-inquiry. So what you mentioned before, sometimes when we are triggered, we're really aware this trigger is really actually not in fitting with the context. Yeah. It's extreme. And the poor person standing there is like, wow, I only said X, Y, Z, but we had an experience at 10 years old that we haven't resolved that came out in that moment. Yeah. So whether it's in the moment, whether it's afterwards, where you're triggered is actually your gold. Because this is your work. You're being shown here, right? Great. Don't poke there, it hurts. Awesome. Let's lean in. For doing some self-inquiry. And I really just love talking about the power of the pause. So a pause can change everything. Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, I'm sure you'll know his quote, but he talks about the pause between the stimulus and the response. And that in this pause moment is where we have power and the freedom to respond. So with triggers, we are, and tell me if you have, I know there'll be lots of questions as I'm speaking, so just pause me if you need to.
Okay.
I'm on a roll.
Okay, that's right. I'll be on a roll afterwards.
Great, I love it. So with triggers, we are reacting. And if we look at the word reacting, we're reacting the same thing again and again and again. That's actually what that word means. So when we pause, and the pause is, obviously there's a mental awareness, but also the sense in the body when we're triggered. Sometimes we can get pulled to, I want to, blast that person, or I want to do that thing that makes me feel better. And we get to, when we're in our peaceful power, drop back from that instinctual pull and drop behind it and go, actually, I would like something different for myself. And then in the pause moment, whether it's a deep breath, whatever it is we do, we move the body, we change environment, we then come back into our powerful, peaceful center, and with fresh eyes can maybe see the situation differently. Yeah. And it can just be like a couple of seconds, some different breathing to come back.
Well, that's right. I've read that the biochemical reaction of being triggered of anger or something only lasts initially about 50 seconds.
Right.
So if you can get through that initial 50 seconds, then you're able to dissolve that initial response and respond differently, more from parasympathetic response. So I'm absolutely a big believer in the power of the pause. So I actually teach, stop whatever you're doing when you notice you're triggered. Obviously that's the first thing is to notice, is stop and pause, use your breath, or do anything, count backwards in Arabic, or I don't care what you do, just pause and don't do anything, just to let that biochemical response go down, and observe, as you said, what am I feeling, what feelings are coming up, what thoughts am I having, what sensations are happening, what's being around when that trigger happens. So start to observe the situation, objectify the situation rather than subjectify it. And then also reflect as well. Okay, is this something where I have noticed that a trigger has arisen before? Is this always the same? Is it always the same person or the same situation? Yeah. And then also finally potentially redo. Can I respond to this situation in new and innovative ways beyond my habitual patterning? And this for me is responding from the frontal cerebral cortex, or actually responding from the third eye. Let's go to the chakra system. Let's mix up the frontal cerebral cortex with the third eye, because I like doing that. Cool. I see this as the seat of intuition in our creativity. And when I say creativity, I don't mean just painting a nice picture. I mean being able to creatively respond to our life and our stimulus in new and innovative ways. Which is really what we're talking about. We're talking about presence, observing, and then when things come up, responding differently. Yeah. And then that goes to the Viktor Frankl
and that's
quote.
A master, isn't it?
It's the master.
So
I changed Viktor Frankl's quote. I hope you don't mind. I like to. I think I can improve on it a little bit. So he says, between stimulus and response, there is a pause, and in that pause lies our ability to choose our response, I think, and then in our response lies our growth and freedom. Yeah. I like to tweak it to say between stimulus and response, there can be a pause if we've done our personal practice that morning, if we've done our work. Yeah. Because for many people, there is no pause between stimulus and response. They're just a habitual creature, habitually responding to their environment from their subconscious mind without that sacred gap. But it takes effort to bring in that sacred gap, to practice that sacred gap, to do our meditation, to do our mindfulness, to do our yoga, to do our qigong, to do whatever our practice is, that we practice inhabiting that place of awareness. Yeah.
And we have to get sick of how we're experiencing life to want to change it. Yeah. As an example, to ground this, a client I work with, every time her partner went on his phone, she got massively triggered. Yeah. And we talked through, because a big part we haven't talked about is the meaning making. So partner goes on phone, right? If I was sitting in that room, that wouldn't trigger me at all. Yeah. But for the wife, massive trigger. And we unraveled, and she made it mean, he doesn't love me, I'm not interesting. And when actually she spoke to him about the meaning she was making, he was like, actually, I've had a massive day and that's my time out when I get home from work. And she'd been running this for years and been triggered by him, even at one point thinking of leaving him because it was such a big deal for her. And so when we are triggered, it's also like, what's the meaning I'm making out of this? And so often we're mind reading someone else's intentionality.
That's true. Meaning making, which is often coming from our subconscious mind and our patterns, and reading someone's intentionality. And I've always said that, don't judge people by their actions, judge them by their intentions, because we all slip up with our actions. They all get misinterpreted. But what were their intentions? Did they really mean to hurt us? Did they really mean to piss us off? Did they mean to trigger us? No, so very rarely.
Yeah. And that's a big part of the developmental coaching, actually. Intentionality. So I love that you brought that up. Just for a second, I'll speak to that, because under everything that we, do and say and think, there is a positive intention, even like under the darkest acts. And starting to learn what our positive intention is around these things that we don't like doing. Say we procrastinate, there's a positive intention. Say we judge them, there's a positive intention. that work, that internal unraveling of what our intentionality is, that's unconscious, is a massive part of where our freedom lies. Because often when we unravel the positive intention, which is unconscious, we're often not getting that. So say, for example, we procrastinate and then we unravel the intention and we go, actually, I procrastinate because I'm trying to protect myself. So if I don't procrastinate, I've got to put that big project out there.
Yeah.
And then the question would be to the client, well, are you protecting yourself with the procrastination? And they're like, fuck no, I haven't managed to launch my project for 3 years. It's making me really frustrated and angry. And actually, I don't feel protected at all. Does that make sense? So that's a really beautiful part of, I just love that you brought intention in because it's so key. And often people don't even know what intentionality they're moving from. It's not often in the conscious awareness.
Yeah, but then you have to dig deep because there's always that positive thing trying to self-protect, self-nurture, self-love, but it's not always seen. And it can be misguided because it can be based on a childhood experience or something.
And it can be so many different things. It can be that, I'm wanting to be loved by somebody else, and they realise what they're actually doing is repelling people with their behaviour. That they're wanting to be loved deep down. So it's really fascinating, unravelling the human psyche in that way.
I want to come back to the thing you said about the phone and how it was a trigger and the whole notion of what I call learning to love irritation. And because once you learn to love the irritating things that arise, it completely pivots your whole freaking life. It's such a game changer for me to see irritation as a good thing. And the way I learned through this is when I was teaching yoga back in the days at Billabong, and people would come in the class and inevitably someone's phone would come off in the middle of my beautiful calm zen chanting yoga class. And I would get irritated. It's like, oh God, didn't I say turn your frigging phones off? My mind would be like, oh my God, that's so rude. I can't believe they couldn't.
There's your meaning making.
There's my meaning making that they meant to do that. And so that was quite a pivotal thing with me over the years and through my learning of understanding irritation to actually see that as a good thing, actually, and to see irritation as a good thing, because of course that is where we learn. We learn through our pain, we learn through our triggers, we learn through our annoyance, and almost looking out for it, not trying to activate it or make it happen. Of course, I'm not going to go and prod someone just to irritate them and make them angry just so I can practice my zenness of not reacting. Of course, that would be crazy. Get me beaten up or something. But look for opportunities of when you do find yourself triggered or when you do find yourself irritated or having irritated thoughts, and say, oh, that's interesting. There's an opportunity for learning. Why is that happening? Where's that coming from? What meaning making am I doing behind that? Is that really the meaning making that I want to do? Is that in line with my intentions and my goals and my heart and my values? So actually, when I did my mindfulness show, in the middle of the mindfulness show, I did this heart meditation, beautiful heart meditation. There's a couple hundred people there. And I actually had an actor placed in the audience. And halfway through the heart meditation, his phone went off. We rigged all this. So it's like, dring, 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 dring. And this guy, this actor, answers his phone. Oh, yeah, hi. Yeah. I can't talk right now. I'm in the middle of a heart meditation at the mindfulness show. Yeah, I'm coming to the party tonight. Yeah, get me a bottle of wine. Yeah, okay, thanks. I've got to go. Bye. So I purposely inserted irritation as an opportunity for people to notice, how did they react to that? What was their thoughts? Were they like, oh my God, what a rude person. What are they doing here? They shouldn't be here. They're too basic or stuff like that. So I think, I just wanted to sit on that notion of learning through our triggers, learning through our irritation, and knowing that's our growth. You're not scared of anything. You're not scared about what's going to arise because you know it's going to be a beautiful learning opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the friction that creates the growth.
Yeah.
And when we are irritated, it's like, oh, what's going on for me that I'm irritated? Because it's so easy to think it's their fault they've got on their phone. But it's like, how are we taking it in and what move are we playing in our minds? What are we making it mean?
Yeah.
It's just so interesting, the self-mastery we can get with the self-inquiry. If we can be curious rather than judgmental, that is like a paradigm shift.
Yeah. Why don't we teach this stuff to kids at school? Why do we just teach them geography, history, maths, and all that shit? Why don't we teach them how to inhabit a human consciousness, how to inhabit a human mind, how to self-master? Like, God, why is this not the first and only thing that we're making sure our kids understand? What a game changer that would be.
What a game changer.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking about these different elements to the Peaceful Power program. So we've talked about triggers. That was the first one. What's
and then let's
one?
talk about how other people view us, and there's being very caught up in how other people are perceiving us.
Yeah.
So some things around that is the message.
So do I look okay? Are my wrinkles showing? Is there a boogie up my nose?
So the interesting thing is around this is that how others perceive us or take us in says so much more about them than us.
Yeah.
And so when we really let that in, it's like, because many people run a pattern which is external referencing, when they pay a lot of attention to how other people are taking them in, what their opinions are, etc. And in that, they lose their own sense of self and what they think about themselves. And so I like to say, what other people think of you is none of your business, which can be a bit triggering sometimes for people, but actually that's the truth. Because, like, for example, everyone listening to this podcast right now has a completely different opinion of me and you. Some might be triggered, some might love it, some might think, what are they talking about? But I'm okay with whatever anyone is experiencing. So it says much more about them than it does about me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're taking the content in based on their own experience, their own judgments, their own beliefs, etc.
So that really comes down to loving yourself.
Loving self, but also recognizing it's actually, if someone else doesn't particularly like you, it's about them, not you. So get really catching that. And the thing with judgment is, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs that run some judgment around themselves about doing social media, for example.
Okay,
I don't want to put that video out there, I'm going to be judged. And when we look at that, the judgment that they believe is out there is their own judgment.
Yeah.
Because they're first of all judging themselves, maybe not having good enough content or not speaking on the video. Then they are judging other people for judging them. But their belief is, I'm being judged out there.
That's such a classic, isn't it? Judging other people for judging them.
It's such a turnaround. So when we can loosen our grip, because often it comes down to self-worth, I must be liked by others to feel worthy within. We can loosen our grip on that and recognise, first of all, you're worthy because you're in human form. Your worth and value is innate. No one can take that away from you. And secondly, it's much more important what you think of yourself. Because out there, you have little to no control. And even if we interviewed everyone that listened to this podcast to ask them what they thought, we'd have to do a lie detector test to get the truth.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
You just don't know.
And so when we let go of all that energy of out there referencing, there's such freedom.
That's a really big point, I think, is not seeking that external validation for your own self-worth, being content with who you are, what you believe in, what you value, what you knowing clearly what your intention is, what you're trying to manifest in the world, how you're trying to show up with full understanding that it might not always be perfect and it's glitchy and we make mistakes and we upset other people and we cause pain. And actually this is, I'm not going to talk too much about my current marriage situation, but this has been a big learning for me in the last year, as it's been reflected back to me that, oh my God, you've traumatized me, you've done this and done that. And of course, that was never my intention. I never wanted to do that. I never meant to do that. And so a big part has been reflecting on my behavior and how that can occur to someone else, but know deeply that I'm still lovable, even if my actions have caused pain accidentally, I just need to be clear in myself about knowing clearly how I'm showing up, knowing clearly how I'm being accountable for that, and loving myself through that, regardless of what someone else is reflecting back on me.
Yeah.
And it's a really big one as well. And then it also, and I resonate with what you said about the entrepreneurs, about putting stuff out there. So I've been hesitant to put stuff out there over the years. It hasn't always been encouraged within my marital situation. Maybe there was, my partner was maybe concerned that I'd look stupid and stuff, and I took that on, and so I wasn't putting stuff out there because I didn't want to embarrass my partner, and now obviously that we're separated, I'm building up the confidence, and I pulled an oracle card when I was in Bali over July, and it was called Radical Expansion, and the key component I took from it said, don't be afraid to give out your unrefined expression, because maybe, just maybe, your unrefined expression is just what the world is looking for, even if it doesn't know it. And so just pulling cards wasn't something that was really in my orbit until quite recently. I thought that was a bit woo-woo. But yeah, just that being confident in my unrefined expression, which is just really being our authentic selves, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
And who else can we be?
Who else can we be?
And then also knowing that changes all the time, right? As we grow and shift and shed, the sense of identity and self drops away. And then there's the flexibility behind it. We don't need to be seen this way or that way. We just are in our beingness.
Yeah, that's right. That flexibility to have different beliefs or have different behaviors, become a different person. It's or a different personality for sure. You've got to be open to that, haven't you? I change my beliefs about stuff all the frigging time.
Well, a belief is a thought you've given value to.
Yeah.
So most of us don't know the beliefs that we run, or we believe that the beliefs are true, but actually they can be seen, reframed, shifted in an instant.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a really important one in terms of that, looking for external validation, how much you care about what other people think, how that can cause suffering, how that can cause so much anguish and stress, because you're constantly trying to second guess everyone who's going to see you, everyone who's in your orbit. And then we start wearing these masks, don't we? And masks are stressful. They're tiring.
It can be exhausting. And, you know, what's behind the mask, the authentic self. And just mentioning the external referencing. So the opposite is the internal referencing.
Yeah.
So someone who's very internally referenced and is only aware of what they think and feel.
Yeah.
So the opposite end isn't perfect. Neither ends are actually good or bad or right or wrong. They both have their strengths. But the work with all of the thinking patterns that I point to in developmental coaching is about understanding you actually want to sit in the middle ground. We are had by neither. And you can try on external when you need it, because sometimes it's very useful. It's great because you're able to make relationships, you're aware of what other people think, and sometimes being really internal is useful. But being too much at either end of those patterns is not a resourceful place to sit.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I've got a selected group of people I'm really close to, that I really in reverence to, that I really admire and honour, and I've definitely probably put you in that basket of people I really trust and know, getting to know quite deeply.
Yeah.
And I am interested in what that group of people think, and I am interested them to just say, if they said, actually, Paul, I think you've lost the frigging plot now. Yeah. I'm kind of intrigued. I might ignore it, of course, but I do like to know that, and I trust that, but I don't really care what the masses think, or but so it's people that I've chosen and selected, who I know really truly deeply, who I love, that I'm interested in what they think. And then for the self, the big thing for me has been to be my authentic self, to get rid of all my shame, to start releasing anything that I'm ashamed of, because shame is really parts of myself that I'm hiding, that I find disgusting or something like that. And I don't find I can be fully my authentic self until I'm kind of releasing those shameful things. So, I used to look at pornography. That was something that I had a shame about. And part of me going through my journey over the last year or so has been to break free from that clutch and release that shame, and then I'm more able to be in my authentic self, which is to talk completely, freely and openly about everything in my life, my desires, what I do. I'm not hiding anything.
Yeah.
And so I can show up in that place and be and love myself clearly. And so I think you're right, it's that balance between the outside reflection and the inside reflection, how you're showing up. Is there still shame bubbling around inside you, and are you dealing with that?
Yes, and I would be interested to know, and you don't have to answer this now, but what's the positive intent for you of running shame?
Of running shame, as it inside my, what's the interesting one? What's the positive intent of running shame? To protect myself from ridicule, to protect myself from people thinking I'm disgusting, to protect myself from people wanting to not like me. I think it's around disgust or something. Okay. There's a lot of us run a lot of disgust around our own bodies and and particularly our own sexuality, and so we're hiding, we're protecting ourselves because maybe we think people won't like us if they know who we truly are. Okay, and so it's interesting to look at that and think, when you're experiencing shame, are you actually protecting yourself from all of those things you've listed? Or is it actually creating the opposite? Probably creating the opposite. I'm pretty sure everyone poops.
I think so, apart from me. Just rainbows.
I've surrendered past that now. I've just gone purely energetic, darling. Yes, I don't do boobs. Yes. But it's true, you know, and so things like that, people have a lot of shame around that. And actually, it's actually one of the things in some of the Tantra training, actually. I knew I'd get some Tantra in here, you see.
I love it.
Keep it about developmental coaching. Yeah, right. I've already moved on to shit and Tantra. Sorry.
Love it. Bring it on.
You know, a lot of people have shame around that. They're not able to discuss it. They don't want to discuss how was your poop this morning or something like that.
What do they make pooping mean? That's what would be interesting to find out, right?
Yeah.
That they're disgusting.
Yeah.
Even though it's something that everyone has to do. If you didn't poop, you'd actually die because the toxins would build up.
Yeah.
How's that for an unhelpful meaning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the goals of doing your Tantra teaching is to become shameless. And of course, sometimes that's used in a negative term. Like I think there's a TV series called Shameless, isn't it? But actually in the Tantric tradition, it's actually as a very high quality to have no shame about anything that you are, to love every single part of your being, you know, your thoughts, your fuck ups, your anger, your love, your joy, your heart, your shit, your sexuality, your desires, your kinks, everything, all parts of it can be loved when you're completely shameless.
So they're talking really, it sounds like about full acceptance of self.
Full acceptance.
Yeah.
Total acceptance.
Yeah. And even of the bits like you say, because really self-love isn't about running a beautiful bubble bath with some chocolate.
Yeah.
It's about loving the parts of yourself that you're trying to press away and hide. It's like shining light on love on them.
Yeah.
That's actually full acceptance.
That's right. And forgiveness when we don't always show up in our best selves, or forgiveness when we do get triggered and angry and shout at someone, or, you know, all of those little muck-ups that we do. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, you know. I'm sorry I've beaten up my kids again and given them 5 black eyes. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. Maybe not that,
but why not?
But why not? Okay, my intention is not to beat up my children. Okay, and move forward. Because like the guilt and shame. It's so destructive.
And just to talk about forgiveness for a moment. So I've worked with many people on that, and one client in particular a few years ago didn't want to forgive her father for something he had done.
Okay.
And when we unravelled why, it was because she believed if she didn't forgive him that he would be in pain and he would be paying. Yeah. And when she caught and realised actually it was only her that was in the pain, she had this massive, she said to me at the beginning of the coaching, I can't let go of that, just so you know. I won't be letting go of that. And when she did and realised that he actually just been getting on with his life. He wasn't experiencing pain from her not forgiving him.
Yeah, so, interesting. It's like, we forgive you. It's quite a controlling thing. Actually, what we should be really saying is, I fully accept the whole situation.
Absolutely.
Quite a different energy, isn't it? Like,
really
I forgive you. It's like a power trip, isn't it? It's like, you're bad and I'm good. And I'm forgiving you. It's like going to confession, isn't it? Like at the church. Only
I never thought about it like that.
Church
Interesting.
has the power to redeem you from your sins, and because I've forgiven you, you're not now going to hell.
It's got that meaning. I mean, the thing I would always consider is, what are you trying to achieve by not forgiving either self or someone else? Because that's where we get ourselves stuck.
Yeah.
Because we think we're gaining something by not forgiving.
Well, because maybe they don't deserve it.
Yeah, and then we create pain for ourselves by holding on.
Yeah.
Like, not forgiving is like drinking poison, expecting someone else to die.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the anger analogy. It's like holding on to a hot coal with the intention of throwing it onto someone else, but only you get burned.
Yes,
exactly.
We're in analogy world again. I love it.
You give one, I've got one.
You're like, Paul's got a better one than me.
No, we'll vote. We'll get the audience to vote, which is for different things, which is the best analogy. Because we've always, every time you've got one, I've got a similar one.
I love that you're bringing the analogies. It's so important, and it helps sometimes for the listeners to really ground what we're pointing to. So yeah.
Okay, so crumbs. Okay, so we've talked about triggers.
Did you just say crumbs?
Crumbs.
That is so English.
Crumbs. Where does crumbs come from?
It's like, I think when I was in England, I used to have an auntie that said it, a posh auntie, and it would be like if she got a bit startled or there was lots going on. So
crumbs. So I'm trying to work out how much we've covered of the peaceful power program that people can do, and because we want to tell people about this program and how it can help them. So we've talked about not being validated by other people's beliefs.
Yeah.
We talked about so much. We talked about self-acceptance.
We've probably covered a lot of it. Like a lot of it is about becoming the witness. Okay. And I like to talk about the witness as being like the eagle flying high above, that non-judgmental, neutral observer that sees beyond the story and is able to literally look down and go, there's the trigger running, there's that thought, there's that behaviour, not being had by it, but observing it.
Yeah.
And that's a state we can get into. Like sometimes when I get into the car to drive somewhere, I drop into the observe and I'm like, what's going on for me right now? Let's witness and observe rather than running the story of it. Yeah. It's very powerful sitting in the seat of the observer, the witness.
Yeah, being the non-judgmental witnessed, as Freud actually used to talk. He's talked about cultivating a gentle, hovering awareness.
Great.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Freud wasn't really known as someone who's mindfulness, but when you study his work, and I like the gentle hovering. You like awareness is gentle,
like the eagle.
Yeah, like the eagle, isn't it? The hovering. In the background, observing. What are you paying attention to? Or Freud used to talk about shining the light in the different rooms of the mind.
Beautiful.
And we can choose where we shine that light, but it takes practice. So tell me briefly, in this program that you offer, are there practices that your clients can do to help them cultivate these qualities?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Every week of the program will be covering a different topic, but essentially what every week will have in common is there'll be group coaching to understand what are my blind spots, where am I self-sabotaging, what am I not aware of, and with that understanding, as that's pointed to, then is the choice. Do I want to keep running that? And it's repeat or evolve or repeat, or do I want to bring more awareness to it? So practices might be obviously some meditations and mindfulness work, but also becoming aware of when we're running these things. Like say, for example, I point to, say that the person runs the external reference pattern. Yeah. So rather than being subject to it, their practice for the next week will be to notice where that shows up in their life. And the thing is, once something is pointed to and it comes out of the subjectivity into the conscious awareness, the objectivity, we don't experience it the same.
Yeah.
It's like if someone's going to buy a white Mini, the next week before they buy it, they'll see white Minis everywhere.
That's so true, isn't it?
So it's the same as that. It's like, right, that's important to my awareness. And then it comes into the intentionality that you mentioned about. I choose to really witness myself and notice who does it happen with and where and how do I feel and what am I thinking. So that's a developmental practice. It's becoming aware of what has been running you that you haven't had brought into conscious awareness before. Yeah. And this is so powerful. And sometimes when people coach with me, they think that I'm going to fix them. And I'm like, actually, you do the work in this. I'm neutral presence. I'm compassionately challenging. I'm intentionally disruptive. And I point to things. We agree some practices and you do the work on it.
Yeah.
I'm here to support you and hold you, but I can't do it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's almost the point I'd like to almost end on, is that we do have a choice.
Absolutely.
To move away from our suffering, to move away from being a victim, to consistently manifesting the life we want in terms of how we feel about our life, how we feel about our thoughts, how we feel about our emotions, how we feel about our actions. And that is in with everyone's power. But they need a bit of guidance. And I think your course, your thing, Peaceful Power, sounds beautiful. I want to do it. I want to get it on the platform. I'm pretty sure we're going to make this happen. Yeah. Get it on the platform, and I'll add on to the end of this podcast the link about how they can do this program, how they can sign up for it. Anything else you want to add, or do you think we've covered most things?
One thing, when you said about guiding, I would just say, just as another thought on that, is I probably more mirror back rather than guide, if that makes sense. So sometimes people think with coaching that I give advice or guidance, and it's actually quite different. It's more facilitation. So I don't ever give anyone answers or advice. That's more the mentoring. Yeah. So it's always like, this is what I'm hearing, I mirror back, because actually the client is the expert on themselves and they have all the answers within them. Yeah. It's just for them to move through the blockages so that the answers that are within them can come out.
That's a really good point, actually. And it's interesting how we use these words, isn't it, without necessarily thinking about the meaning behind them or how someone could interpret that. So, yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to really be careful, actually, how I use those words. And I think that's right, mirroring back or facilitating someone's own self-healing, because they know themselves better than anyone.
Yeah, exactly. And if we guide us like we think we know more, but the client's the expert, I follow them rather than ever guide them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Beautiful, Louise.
So lovely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so honoured to be your guest and to be here with you. It's been so fun.
That's so good.
I have so much love for you.
Yeah, maybe we can do this kind of semi-regularly, like
I'd love to.
every month or two or something. And delve. I'm sure we're not going to run out of shit to talk about. I've got about another 100 analogies.
We're doing a podcast on analogies for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Louise. We'll let the audience know where they can find your Peaceful Power program, and look forward to speaking to you again another time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Awesome. Bye-bye. Woo! Woo! That was so fun.
That's so good.
You're so good at doing this.
That was so easy. That might be the best soundbite. But
that's how they got some of the. So I can just move the. That's how they got some of the best visuals in Dirty Dancing.
Yeah, right.
They kept the camera rolling and moved away. You know that bit where she puts her arm up and Patrick Swayze goes down and she gets tickled? That wasn't meant to be filmed. And that's one of the best bits.
Yeah, right, okay. So when I reach over and just stroke your hand gently, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I worship you and your divine feminine, madam. Thank you so much for your
I love your divine feminine as well.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about really divine masculine and feminine, did we?
I know.
That was the one thing I was going to talk about.
So much. I think I mentioned yin and yang at one point, but there was so much.
So next one we'll do masculine and feminine. Oh God, there's just an infinite amount.
We talked about also looking at breakdowns, breakups, breakthroughs.
Yeah.
And we could talk about some of our personal experiences as well.
I was almost crying on actually the way here because so I'm going to cry already. She's going to see her lawyer today, and it's really tricky. It's really tricky, and I thought, oh my God, are we going to talk about relationships and stuff? And I was like, oh, I don't want to cry in the podcast. But I do want to talk because it's my authentic self, and I do want to share about that journey because it's been one of the most pivotal things in my life, going through a marriage breakup of 17 frigging years, and going through this, and I'm constantly crying. I'm crying all the time. It brings it, which is great. I know, it's so good. It's like
the energy is shifting.
It's shifting and stuff. So maybe the next one, maybe when I've gone through that process, that I'm more okay to talk about it. You know, I'd love to talk about relationships and conflict and healing and stuff like that.
And when I talk about leaving my ex-fiance, even though I'm so happy in love with my partner, my life's partner, there's always tears that come up.
Yeah.
Talking back through it. And that's just real.
Yeah, it's real.
Being human hurts. Making these decisions is painful. Yeah. And the emotion that shows that we're in alignment with our truth, right?
Yeah. Because I can't do this podcast unless I'm showing up in all sides of myself. Absolutely. And like my 17-year marriage is such a big part of me and my life. That how can I not talk about that? Obviously, I don't want to talk about intimate, personal stuff, but I do want to talk about how I've shown up. But I want to do it without being in conflict with her privacy. So it's a real juggle. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it.
I was speaking to one of my coaches about this when I broke up from my fiance, and what she said to me that really helped was, remember, this is your story.
Yeah.
So, of course, being aware of how, not revealing too much of how the other processed, but our story is our story, and we had every right to share it.
Yeah.
Because actually, others probably need to hear it.
Yeah.
How we moved through a breakup, what was our experience, what was our strategies, what was our learnings. That stuff is so vital, and it doesn't get shared sometimes because we worry about upsetting someone else. But actually, we're here of service, and it means sharing.
It's all going to be in my bloody book. So that's no hold bars. I'm just making sure the financial settlement is signed before the book comes out, just in case it triggers someone.
I remember what we said about triggers.
The book.
If anyone's triggered, that is their trigger in the face of the experience. Right?
Yeah.
So,
but it's done with kindness and love, you know.
Not responsible for others' triggers.
Not responsible for others' triggers.
Yeah.
No. Exactly. Cool. All right.
Cool.
We're done. Awesome.
We're done.
Let me give you a hug. You have been listening to Radical Expansion with PVB. All the information about how to connect with this week's guests will be in the show notes. Till next time, love you guys.